on Tuesday morning this week, as I was sitting in my prayer stool, on my prayer chair, the words royal gossip came to mind. And I thought, that's really interesting. I wonder what that's all about. Royal gossip. Anyway, I sat with them for a few days, and I've ended up with a title for what it is that I wanted to share today. Royal Gossip, Fired by God. I thought that's quite a provocative sort of title for a sermon. Royal Gossip, Fired by God. Do you know? Do you want to hear some gossip? Somebody want to hear some gossip? Do you? There's excitement in the room. Yes, yes. Do you know? Do you know about the king who didn't marry or didn't have any children and was quite attracted to male courtiers, especially those who wore long pointy shoes? Do you imagine the gossip about that king? Do you remember who he was? Anybody? Do you remember the king who was so weak that all the noblemen of the day would gather around and say, hang on a moment, we don't have a problem here. We can do our own thing. And they did, and they built castles, and they made life a misery for the people in their villages. Do you remember who that king was? And the gossip that went with him? No. Do you remember the king who was so evil, so bad, that it was said of him, foul as it is, hell itself is defiled by the presence of this king? Do you remember who that was? He's having a go. Well done, you. No. Do we remember the gossip of the royals of the past? Nah. Why? Because that's what happens to gossip, doesn't it? Here today, gone tomorrow. Are we going to remember the gossip of the royals today? Here today, gone tomorrow. Will there be more gossip tomorrow about the royals? Oh yes, there will. And in our 24/7 news cycle, it will be fed, and it will be fed, and it will be fed. And the words that are spoken will be carried, and will be shared, and will do their thing. I looked up the meaning of gossip. Anybody know the root of the meaning of gossip? God-sib, God's sibling, somebody who is related spiritually to somebody, like a godparent. That's the origin of the meaning of the word gossip. It had a positive, it started in a very positive place. It meant somebody who would care for somebody, somebody who would take responsibility for somebody, somebody who would do good for somebody. And over time it grew. It grew to women who would invite other women to be present with them in childbirth. And you can imagine, you're not going to invite any old body into your maternity ward, are you? I don't know. But you're unlikely to, are you? You're going to invite trusted people who you can have the confidence of, who you can share deeply with, and who you can talk to. And then, of course, it grew and it changed, and the women who were looking after each other in maternity wards suddenly became, oh, what are they talking about? What are they doing? And so today we have this negative understanding of the word gossip, which is terrible. Experts tell us that a very small percentage of gossip today is toxic. A very small percentage. Gossip is general, gossip carries on. But you know what? If I didn't gossip with my family, about my family, I wouldn't be able to care for them the way I do. I wouldn't be able to love them the way I do. It's about the use of words, isn't it? It's about how we say things. It's about our objective in saying things. It's about our agenda in saying things. And we, as followers of Jesus, we know where we stand with these things. We have a responsibility, don't we? We have a right to speak truth. We have a right to speak wholeness and healing and blessing, to speak these things. And we do that with each other, and we can do it with each other in a very healthy way. It doesn't have to be malicious. It doesn't have to be toxic. It doesn't have to be poisonous. As I've been thinking about it during the week, we have seen people damaged by words, haven't we? We have all been damaged by words. That's not why we were given the ability to speak. We were given the ability to speak, to bless, to multiply, to increase, to bring favor. And we all know people who have been damaged by words. And we ourselves have been damaged by words. And that sort of content of communication, well, if the Gospels are anything to go by, every word that is spoken is going to be held before the Lord God. And we will be accountable for every word. And not just us, but everybody. The word of evil, the word of curse, the word of condemnation that has been thrown at you wrongly will have to be held accountable before God one day. As well as the words we have spoken. There is good guidance in Paul's letters and in the Proverbs about how we speak, and there is caution about gossip. There is caution about idle chatter, tittle-tattle, which is of no worth. Luke chapter 1, verses 57 and following. It should be on the screen. Luke chapter 1, verses 57 and following. When it was time for Elizabeth to have her baby, she gave birth to a son. Her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had shown her great mercy, and they shared her joy. On the 8th day, they came to circumcise the child, and they were going to name him after his father Zechariah. But his mother spoke up and said, "No, he shall be called John." They said to her, "There is no one among your relatives who has that name." Then they made signs to his father to find out what he would like to name the child. You remember, of course, his father was dumb because he didn't believe the angel when the angel told him, "You're going to have a son." Then they made signs to his father to find out what he would like to name the child. He asked for a writing tablet, and to everyone's astonishment, he wrote, "His name is John." Immediately his mouth was opened and his tongue set free, and he began to speak, praising God. All the neighbors were filled with awe, and throughout the hill country of Judea, people gossiped. People talked about all these things. Everyone who heard this wondered about it, asking, "What then is this child going to be?" For the Lord's hand was with him. The truth of the matter is, the two birth narratives that we read in Luke's Gospel were full of gossipy sort of material, weren't they? An elderly woman who suddenly finds herself carrying a child with a priestly husband who went into the temple speaking and came out not speaking and had to go home and somehow or another communicate to his wife, "We're going to have a babe." I would have loved to have been a fly on that wall. You can imagine the gossip, can't you? And then a young teenage girl, unwed, pregnant. The gossip of the day would have been horrific and damaging and painful. But you know what? Gossip fired by God, carries throughout the centuries. And it brings good news, and it brings truth, and it brings light and life and hope. And it brings all that we need. Because words that are spoken in truth and light and love are going to be words that God is going to perpetuate and perpetuate and perpetuate. Because that's the business he's in. Truth, light, and love. And if you need to hear it today, you are valuable, you are loved, you are beautiful. He's fighting for you, and he wants you to know his healing in this season.